What up, boys, and welcome back to another card review. Incredible, I know, fresh content and ideas come out of this channel every single day. Anyway, for real though, this will be the last one I do on spells, and we'll pause this series for a little while. I'd like to do troops in the future, but my channel can't just be one big spell comparison channel. Alright, it's just not happening. Anyway, if you are new to this channel and do enjoy today's content, please consider subscribing. It helps me out a bunch and keeps you up to date with the latest and greatest Clash Royale strategy content. Apart from that, let's get into this. So off we go again to compare win and usage rates of these two cards to reveal the story of these two cards in the metagame right now. At the time of recording, the lightning and rocket spells are barely being used. Rocket appears in around 8% of decks, whereas lightning only appears in around 6% of decks. If we double both of those usage rates and combine them together afterwards, Barbarian Barrel and Poison individually would still be used more in this game. It's safe to say these two cards aren't at their peak right now. As for win rates, these cards don't really do any better here. Lightning stands at 47%, whilst Rocket stands at 45%. These numbers don't really tell us anything between two spells because they're so low and so close together. I guess the only real info we gain is that they need buffing, but we'll go into that more later. Lightning is honestly such a ball ache for this type of video. We sorta can't compare its damage output to Rocket's because Lightning obviously hits 3 units in its massive radius. However, we can do an offensive versus defensive damage test. On offense, you'll usually only ever use Lightning to hit the tower and other units. This can be 1 unit or it may be 2, so we'll call it directly down the middle and say we hit a tower and 1.5 units. The Lightning does 877 damage, times by 2.5 targets, gives us around 2,200 damage output. Of course, this is just an average estimate for when you use the Lightning on offense, but it's all of the best metric we can actually use. The Rocket, however, with its tiny radius, will only usually hit the tower and 1 unit, so we'll simply double the Rocket's damage here. 1,232 times by 2 is around 2,500, so overall very similar outputs. But we must consider the Lightning's reach. Would you sacrifice 300 damage for the ability to reach across the board? Personally, I would. On defense, I feel as though the roles almost reverse. You see, the bridge actually acts as a bottleneck for units, making them clump up and become easier to hit with splash. This makes the Rocket super value, as it can then hit multiple units. This isn't to mention what you can do with Tornado, forcing these troops to clump up again to face their rockety death. Lightning, on the other hand, won't do as well in the same scenario. Whilst Lightning doesn't have a radius issue, Rocket has ways of getting around its radius, and such is usually the better spell on defense. Now, the effects of these two spells are kind of niche and not very important to them. Dare I say, the main effect of these two spells is just the raw damage output that they possess. Lightning, for example, has its stun, but how many units does that actually bother? Inferno Tower and Inferno Dragon hate it for sure, but these are used in a total of 11% of decks. It's not really worth running Lightning for 1 in 10 matchups against an Inferno unit. Outside of these two Inferno troops, Lightning Stun does what? Resets a few princes, stuns a unit for half a second. It's very meh, and nobody out there would suddenly love Lightning if its stun was doubled, but damage was halved. That kind of balance change would actually probably just nuke the card instead. The Rocket's effect is probably the weirdest thing to exist in this game. It has the same knockback that Snowball does, but does 7.5 times the damage that Snowball does. While Snowball knocks back your Musketeers and Mini-Peckers, Rocket straight up murders them, deeming its effect not much use at all. And against any units it doesn't kill, these are probably resistant to the Rocket's knockback anyway. The only troops we have to prove that the Rocket's knockback actually exists are Knight, Guards, Valkyrie, Lumberjack, Ram Rider, Balloon, and Raw Recruits. That's right, the Rocket's knockback affects a total of 7 units. Only 2 of those interactions are actually useful too, so in all the effects of these spells are pretty redundant and people only really use these spells for their raw damage output. The key holdback for Rocket right now is of course its tiny radius. This makes placement so hard to nail, especially with its really long travel speed. Pair this with its high elixir count and you have an elixir management disaster just waiting to happen. Of course, once you use the spell enough, this becomes pretty simple and easy, but initially it's a hard spell to grasp. Lightning, on the other hand, is instant and super simple. You have so much time to wait because of its huge radius, and then it hits near instantly. This makes Lightning a much lower skill spell. Sure, Lightning's reward is also lower, but by how much? As we discussed earlier, the damage output is only about 300 less for lightning, so why would you not want to be using this spell over the rocket? The answer usually comes from decks that each spell prefers to find itself in. Rocket is preferred with win conditions such as Logbait, Expo, and Hog Rider. These are sort of ones that don't really push units to the tower all that often or for very long, meaning you probably don't actually need to hit units around the tower. In fact, the archetypes we most commonly see Rocket in are actually the same ones that we see the log in the most. This is because these archetypes focus on cycling and chip, so having this pure damaging spell in there means that they have another option to obtain damage and chip down the tower in this quick cycling archetype. Lightning on the other hand lends itself to the complete opposite. This spell is better in big heavy pushes that start from the back and build up a high elixir lead. This forces your opponent to defend heavily, allowing you to obtain targets for your lightning spell. The likes of Golem, and more Golem enjoy lightning. I guess Elixir Golem is also on this list, but really, it's just Golem. So yeah, these two spells play so differently in the game despite both being 6 elixir heavy spells. I said in last week's video that Rocket, Lightning, Arrows, and Royal Delivery are the 4 damage spells that are bad right now and could use changing. So I actually have some balance change suggestions. Both of these spells are unique in the combination of their radius and elixir cost, and for that reason I can't see Supercell changing either of those stats. This literally leaves us just with damage to change. I think you could do one of two things here. You could change the raw damage stat on both spells, but not enough to alter any interactions with the spells. Instead, this would just result in the spells dealing more chip damage to crown towers. Secondly, you could just change their crown tower damage alone. However, I don't think Supercell would do this due to every spell being consistent 35% of their actual damage right now. In my opinion, Lightning is the stronger spell, but Rocket suits its niche better. Beatdown isn't great at the moment, and even then Poison overshadows Lightning in these beatdown decks. However, Rocket doesn't really have a replacement spell to the decks that want to use Rocket. And yeah, that's all I got for Rocket versus Lightning today, boys. Let me know your thoughts on these two spells in the comments down below, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video today. Thank you all for watching, and peace.